Why should you try dyeing Angora fiber? Let's find out. Hi, I'm Sarah from Feathertail Fiber Arts, and this is Ewok, our very own fiber critter. He is an English Angora. Angora fiber is actually one of my favorite fibers to dye. It doesn't come without challenges, clearly. So because Angora fiber is so soft, if it gets wet, it felts really, really easily. And because it's so fine, it's hard to get the dye and the dye to move through the fibers. So it's really common to get like air pockets and stuff in the fiber while you're dyeing, and the dye has a hard time reaching that. So that's obviously a challenge, but I mean, it is so soft. So when everything's dry, it's very, very lovely to work with. And I found that Angora fiber actually takes on very vibrant colors, which is one of the things that makes it so much fun to dye. So let's see what's all involved in it. Say bye, Ewok. So here I'm going to start by filling up my pot. I'm going to start with way too much water, and then I'm going to just gently pull apart the Angora fiber. Now, Ewok was a little bit mad at what I trimmed him, so some of these fibers are kind of stuck together, but they're still loose enough where I can pull them apart fairly easily. And then with each layer, I'm going to push it down into the water to make sure it all gets wet. And I keep adding layers, and then once I get to a certain point, I'm constantly pulling the fiber apart and checking for dry spots, because we want all of the fiber to be wet. From here, I'm going to drain out the excess water so that it is low immersion. And then we'll add a little bit of vinegar so that the dye can actually take and set. And then we're going to put it on the heat. Now you want to manage your heat very carefully, because boiling Angora is the fastest way to make it felt out of everything I'm going to do today. So now as I start, I'm going to take two of my skewers. I use a lot of skewers when I dye, and I'm just poking holes so that these are more like kind of pressure release vents, so that if it's going to boil, I can see what's happening. And just having those little pockets will help keep it from boiling and getting a big air bubble underneath. So as I add the dye, I'm just going to work it into the fiber bit by bit. And the nice part is the skewers are fairly non-invasive, so it looks like I'm moving stuff around a lot, but you'll be surprised at how much it can take. So I'm doing kind of a blue, green, purple colorway today, mostly just because I didn't want to have to worry about complementary colors mixing into each other for this video. I just wanted to make it quick and keep the colors simple. Now, this purple that I added just now is going to bleed. I don't know what it is about that purple, but that purple bleeds a ton. So it's just adding layers and layers of dye. Now, once I've got all my dye in and it's set for a while, I'm going to start just kind of pulling the fiber apart and checking for light spots where there were air bubbles. And I'm constantly just kind of shoving the air bubbles down, poking holes in them, so that we can get dye to those bits of fiber. Now, once I've kind of pulled my pale spots to the surface, then I'm just going to go ahead and patch it with some excess dye. And then I'll let it sit and kind of take in the dye real well. From there, I'm going to pour it into my colander. And this method of rinsing, it's very, very gentle on the fiber, but it does take several rinses. So I fill up my pot with some more water, and I will just set the fiber into the pot so that the water just kind of runs through all of those fibers, and I will gently comb through it with my fingers just to kind of release those excess dye particles. And you'll see that I have quite a bit of dye left over, but there's actually still some tiny little pale spots, but it's just so hard to get dye to move through Angora, so I tend to use a lot of dye, I suppose. Okay, so after that, I'll use some fiber rinse after the first rinse, because the first rinse is really kind of just getting the excess dye particles off. And this is the unicorn fiber rinse is a really nice, easy detergent. It's not a scour, it's just for non-lanolin fibers, and I'll use that in all my subsequent washes. And then each dye bath, you'll notice that the color is actually changing. It started off as dark blue, and here's that purple I was telling you about that was bleeding. So now this is a pretty good paleness, and I'll go ahead and give this a final squeeze. Don't wring it, just a squeeze. And then we take it over to our dry rack, and it looks like a wet mess right now, but if you'll notice, I can actually still pull these fibers apart, and it'll transform completely once everything's dry. So here's the final result. You can see that it still looks a little bit compacted just from being wet, but I can pull these fibers right apart, and you'll just get this wonderful cloud of Angora, and it pulls apart very, very easily. And this is even starting with a partially matted fiber mess. So you can see all the colors and whatnot that came through, and just the depth that you can get on Angora. So very, very lovely result. So definitely something I would recommend trying. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, make sure that you sign up for our email list where you can see more videos, get some amazing discounts, or if you just want overall fiber spoilage, that's the place to be. Trust me, you won't regret it. So you can sign up over at feathertailfiberarts.com.